version 6 routing. These details I already explained yesterday. Differences we will see after we learned routing. What is 5 routing, how it works, and 6, what are the basic difference. Now, what is the library? Library for routing is the library required for routing is React Router DOM. So library for routing is this React Router DOM. That is the library, right? React Router DOM is the library. Now in this, we will first today discuss the basic routing, we can say components, basic routing components. What are the basic routing components? Means to design routing, what are the basic components? The basic routing components required for designing routing is, first one, we need a browser router. We need a browser router. Actually, what is the role of browser router is? So it transcompiles, you can say. It transcompiles the virtual route into actual browser route. Browser router is going to transcompile the actual virtual route into browser route. Actually, two techniques are there. Yesterday I showed you one technique. In the advanced we use another. What technique is? Yesterday what we done? So we have configured, we import browser router as router. We imported the browser router as router and we are using that router, right? From which location? React Router DOM. We have imported from there. But actually, then what we are doing? We are configuring a router. And in this router, you can directly define your routes. Okay. We can configure your routes here. That is one technique. Another technique is, or you can do in this way. You can simply import a browser router direct from React Router DOM. You can import directly browser router from DOM and directly you can use browser router. You can use browser router and you can configure your routes. Your routes can be defined here. This is browser router. There are two ways. Either you actually, do you know what this is called as? What I am doing here? Any technical term for this? So actual library is browser router. I am renaming this as router. So that in short, I can use router. Directly we can use browser router. I'm keeping it short. What is called as? What this process called as? Giving a short name for this. Aliasing, very good. So this is called as aliasing. This process is called aliasing. Aliasing means instead of giving a lengthy reference, you can give an alias. You can give a shorter reference for that. That is what actually aliasing, right? Yeah. So we are aliasing here. We are aliasing it, right? Fine. So we can directly use the alias name. So this is actually, aliasing. Aliasing. That means the process of configuring a shortcut name for that is aliasing. You can use aliasing or you can directly use browser router. You can do any, right? So that is first one. You need a browser router. This browser router makes the routing understandable to the browser, so it can handle, right? Now, at very high level, one question is asked actually, but very high level, that is very rarely you will find that question. That means which browser object of JavaScript, which browser object of JavaScript can handle navigation? Which browser object of JavaScript can handle navigation? Any idea? Which browser object of JavaScript can handle navigation? In JavaScript, if I have to navigate from one page to another, which object we use? In JavaScript, you designed a login page. If user ID password correct, then from login, he need to go to success page. How to redirect? Which object is used for redirecting? The object used for redirecting is location. JavaScript have a location object. This location object have a property called location.href. This location.href is used to navigate to any specific location. Dynamically, JavaScript allows navigation to any location by using location object, right? So these are very extreme experience level questions, because this much in depth, even the interviewer will not show interest with freshers. So very experienced people, then they can go very in depth about the topic. In that case, you can see this. Another option is there. Actually, another option is how we can add a new page into current browsing history. Actually, how we can add a new page into current browsing history? Actually, for that, there itself answer also there, by using history object. By using history object. How to access browser history? In JavaScript, we have a history object. By using JavaScript history object, we access browser history. After accessing browser history, we can know how many pages are in current history. What we can do is we can push a new page into history. If you push a new page into history, then you can navigate to that page. So these techniques are very important to understand, because we have to use them now. In React, we have to use them. In React, you will find use location hook. You will find use history hook. These are the hooks related to routing. Later hooks point we will discuss. Right? That means use location hook. It can identify the complete path. It can identify the parameters. We can access them by using that. Use history, it allows you to manage the browsing history. That means to know how many pages are in history, to push a new page into history, to make the user navigate to that page. We can do that by using history. These are very important, and these are actually managed in browser level by using browser object. You know browser objects now. How many JavaScript browser objects are there? history, location, navigator, document, and window. Window is the parent. Window is the parent, all others are the object. So these are also very important to understand. So first component is browser router. So what is the role of browser router and why we need this? In routing, we need a browser router. That is first. Okay. Second, next, in routing, we need routes. We need routes. What is routes? It is a collection. It is a collection of routes. It is a collection of routes defined for application. Actually, what it will do, so it creates a routing table. Am I right? It creates a routing table. It configures a routing table. So routes is a collection of routes. So that means you have to syntactically write like this. We have browser router, and in the browser router, we have routes. We have routes. And here browser router. And in the routes, you need to define your routes. You have to configure your routes. We have to configure the routes here. So this is the hierarchy. First, we need a browser router. Then we need a routes. It creates the collection of routes, right? Configure the collection of routes. Next, another component, route. It is used to configure a route. It is used to configure a route. And very important, every route is an object. Every route is an object with a set of properties. Every route is an object with set of properties. So many properties are there for a route. So many properties are there for a route. Actually, it is an object which contains properties like exact. It contains property like exact. It contains property like index. It contains property like path. It contains property like element. So these are the properties of a route. First, we are discussing basic. Later, we will discuss advanced. That means level by level, we will do that. So when to use exact, index, path also, we will discuss. We will learn about that. Technically, route contains a lot of things. That means syntactically how you define. So every route contains a path. Every route contains an element. Every route configures an element. And every route have an index. Every route have an exact. All these options are defined in a route. This is how we define the route. That is how we configure the route. So that means generally what we do, example means how we configure. So we have a browser router. In the browser router, we have routes. In these routes, we have route. So route contains path, route contains the other details, and like this. You can configure all your routes here. So that means we have route, we have path, and all the details about the route, and we close the routes, and we close the browser router. That's how we define. So that is how we are configuring. Now, very important, you should know that actually route can contain child routes also. Route can contain child routes also. That we will see in second level. First level, we will see how to define basic routes. Then we will go to the child routes, nested routes. That means actually a route can have a collection, of child routes. A route can have a collection of child routes. That means actually we defined a routes. In this routes, we have a route. And in this route, we are defining some path. So we are defining some element. And actually in this route, you can have another route. This can have a path and this can have an element. This is child route. That is child route. That means in the route, you can have another route. Like this, you can have. So that means we can define the child routes inside the parent. In this child route, there can be another route. You can have any number of routes. So any hierarchy of routes you can configure. That we will see in the second level of designing, we will see. So route is combination of child routes also. Actually, route is a combination of parameters also. We will discuss them all level by level. That means actually route can also have route parameters. Route can also have route parameters. That means in the parent route, you can define the route parameters also. For that, actually, later I will give you detail. Just example I will give here. This is route. Suppose we have a path, we have an element. Now in this route, actually this is route, and we can have route, and here in the path, we can configure some colon parameter. We can have a parameter and we can have an element. What element to define? Like this you can have. What are parameters, how they are defined, we are going to see now. We will see, detail we will see. So route is very complex. A route is an object. That route object contains directly some attributes. It can contain child routes. It can contain route parameters. Every route can contain all these things, route parameters. Not only route parameters, it can even have search parameters. We call route parameters and search parameters. Actually, route can also have search parameters. Route can also have search parameters. Actually, search parameters means, suppose we have a route and this is having a path and it is having an element. And in this, you see route. And here we can have route. We have a path. Actually, this is parameter. Generally, we define the parameter like this. It is not finished. I will write here. Actually, here you can have a question mark. And here we can put a key, and equal to, we can put a value, and ampersand, we can put a key and another value. This is just like query string. That means you can configure a route parameter along with query string. Yesterday we learned that route parameters are simple. Earlier we have to use query strings, and now we are using route parameter. But remember, it is not replacement, it is just alternative. That means you can have an application using both query string as well as route parameter. It will be using route parameters as well as query string, because lot of lengthy queries will be there. So in that case, means generally we use these kind of techniques in a concept called mostly used in ad hoc querying. We mostly use this in ad hoc querying. Have any idea about ad hoc queries? Any idea? Have you ever heard about a concept like OData in software technologies? No. So generally when people learn about RESTful services, web services, this OData is very popular actually. Ad hoc querying means, I will tell you a simple point. See, ad hoc querying is nothing but, suppose you see, I'm using a website like Just Dial. Okay. Just Dial is a website. Now it is a single page application. Just Dial is a single page application. Now in this Just Dial, see how many categories are there. Left side. So many categories. And see, in every category, suppose I say automobile. In every category, again subcategories are there. In every subcategory, again subcategories will be there. Right? It will have a lot of lengthy hierarchy. You see the route parameters here. Right? So now the point here is, if you are having so many categories, that means you are having so many categories. That means so many multi-levels of categories are there. In that case, now imagine how many queries a developer need to keep ready. Right, in the background. Right? How many queries as a developer I need to keep ready? Because I don't know how he will query. I don't know which category he wants, what he will query. And remember, this is just, I opened only one location of Hyderabad. Different cities locations are there again. That means whenever I launch it, it will ask which city. In that again, categories. Now, ad hoc querying is nothing but, it is a technique used in queries, which allows us to build a query live. That means when user is selecting, based on that, a query is built and submitted to data. That's good. Not good, that's great. So that is what actually ad hoc queries. That means you will not keep the queries ready. You will build a query. So with the selection of what user is making and submitting, we build queries. So that is what actually OData, this is very much used with the databases actually. With the databases, we use this OData like concepts. These are drivers like OData. Yeah, this is official, this one, OData. This is OData like concepts we use actually. So this is used for handling and communicating with the database across the world. That means a lot of data science, analytics, reporting, everything depends on these kind of queries. Right? So this is used with OData. Means this is ad hoc queries used with this type of concept. Actually, we have to implement these kind of concepts to handle such queries. This is one concept in your technologies you will learn when you are learning Oracle, MongoDB, and all such databases like. Now the point is, we build the queries live, right? And we submit the queries. It is a concept of how we can search for any content in the page directly. By using these search parameters we can do. And route can contain such parameters also. So many points are there now, right? So 3 things we have. One is browser router. Another one is routes. Another one is route. Okay, next, another. All these we will learn level by level. Means how to write parameters, nested, all these things. First, we need to understand the hierarchy of the components. Next, another important, we have a link. Already we know what is this. It generates a router link. Router link. What is difference between anchor and router link? So it navigates to specific path configured in route table. It navigates to specific path. It navigates to specific path configured in route table. That means what is anchor and what is link? Anchor is going to navigate to any specific page and any specific location in page. And the link is used to navigate to any route path. It is going to navigate to any route path. It can take us to any specific route path and it can handle. That we will see technically how we define this. We have to configure link and link to. Link to, we have to define the route path. We need to specify the route path. You have text or image, anything you can keep as a link. Am I right? It is just like a hyperlink with text, image, symbols, anything you can keep there. So that is the route path, how you configure the route path. Now, one more important here is we have an outlet. We have an outlet. As of now, we don't need immediately this outlet, but later we will see how we can define that, right? Outlet is the thing, but actually it configures the target location. It configures the target location where the resulting markup must be rendered. That means it decides where to show the result. That means it defines where to display the result. Outlet indicates where the result must be displayed. That means you requested something, then where to show it? That means in the page. But in the page, which location? Where you want to display the content? That is decided by outlet. That means, for example, you designed like this. That means you designed a page and you have a header. So you have a navigation bar, something like this here. Now you have some advertisements right side like this here. Now, very important, suppose you have like home, like contact, like about, all these things. And when you requested contact, where to render that contact details? This is the output. Where to render? Here or here or here? Where? That is decided by outlet. That is decided by outlet. That means now you keep your outlet here. You keep your outlet here. That means now it is going to render here. You keep outlet here, it will render there. You keep outlet here, it will render here. That means outlet decides where to render your result. That means when you request any path, now where to render the resulting markup of that path? The resulting markup must be rendered in which location in the page, that you decide. So you can keep that using outlet, router outlet. That is what actually outlet is required for. So syntax, we just have to use this outlet. So we have to use outlet, right? And where to show that outlet, you decide that. Actually, generally, we can keep this outlet in a main, right? Or we can keep this in some other location. That's you can decide based on where you want to display outlet. These all we will see level by level now, right? It's not done. So many others are there, but these are the basic components. So what are the components totally? Let me give the summary here. We have browser router, we have routes, we have route, we have link, and we have an outlet. These are all the members. What is their purpose and how to configure? I have showed you. Right? Now, actually, so we will see some level by level example here. First thing is you should know that. So route can use markup directly as element from element. Route can use markup directly from element. What does that means? I will show you. That means you can design route without any components. That means actually home, about, contact, all these we designed components. We are creating components and we are calling those components and using it. But actually route can use markup directly from element. It can directly use the markup from element. That means you can say that. So it can render markup directly as a result. It can render markup directly as a result. So you don't need to bring markup from a component. You can directly render markup. That is important. For example, see, that means how we can configure this, how we can define. Let's see, I am creating here. Let's close all. Yeah. Here in the components, let's create a new file. In the components, I am creating a simple new file and I will give the name as spa component. So component, right? Yeah. .js, single page component.js. I just given that spa component.js. Okay, now here we will design. So export default function and spa component. So it is a function and it should return some markup. So we will define container fluid. Now here, see what we are defining. We are importing browser router from React router. And we are importing routes. And we are importing link. These are enough, basic. So we have browser router, routes, route, and link. Now we need to configure here. So here we are designing. So first we are configuring a browser router. In the browser router, so we defined a browser router. And in the browser router, I am creating a navigation bar. I'm creating a simple navigation bar. So here I'm not taking much complex design, simple. First, we need to understand concept, right? So here I will keep a ordered list and with a list item. Let's keep an unordered list, better, yeah. And here I'm creating, so here I'm creating a link. And in this link, we will give as HTML. So just text I defined there. So similarly, I will give another link and this is some CSS. That's it. Just 2-3 options you define. So here I defined some JavaScript, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. These are the options. Now below this, I am configuring the routes. After the navigation bar, just I will put an horizontal line. And here we are configuring the routes. In the routes, we have a route. And this route is configuring. I can simply end if we don't have child routes. If we don't have child routes, we can simply end. This route is having a path. Path is, the route path is suppose HTML, right? HTML, that is the path. If it is HTML element, it should render element. And here I am designing a simple heading. And directly I am rendering heading. So, or you can see here, I will do one thing. So here I will render a main, right? Inside the main, this is main, and inside that main, that means element is directly rendering main. So let's make it clean like this. Now in the main, I have a heading. So this is HTML and a paragraph. It is a markup language. That's how I defined a route. Now, very important, element is not bringing the markup from any component. It is directly rendering some markup. It's not necessary that you have to bring markup from a component. You can directly render some markup. Suppose I want to show a error message. You will design a component for that and display error message. No, we have to just render message. Right, in this case, this is how it can handle. This is one route we configured. So copy, and the same, we have another route. And this route is, if path is CSS, then HTML, this is CSS. And here I define, it defines styles. Just I given that. And one more route we need to configure. And here I defined the route path as some JS. And here I will write as a JavaScript. So it is a language like this. Just I will define. Now you can see this is the route path configured for that. And very important is now link this link to where /HTML. This should link to where, so that is /CSS. This should link to where /JS. The route paths we have to define. So that is configuring the route. So defining the route. This is basic how you do. Right here we are not having components. We are directly having some markup to render. So I will make this as, so startup. Now our index.js, I will keep the Spark component as startup. That is the Spark component configured in the startup. And you have these things. And I have HTML, I have CSS, I have JavaScript. Directly, the markup is rendered. You don't need a component, right? We can directly define the component and we can access the component. So we can configure this, right? So this is a simple example that route can use markup directly from element. It can render markup directly as result. You don't need to bring it from a component, right? Generally, when we need a component, if we can directly render like this, then why we need a component? Component is required when we need some interactions in it. That means if you are directly presenting some static content, then you can directly do like this. If you are rendering some dynamic content, which will handle interactions from the user, It will handle dynamic data. In that case, we have to write events, we have to write functions, then we have to design a component and bring it. Without that, directly you can configure in this way. So this is one point. That example I will tell you, but before going into example, we can directly render the markup. So what is that? So syntax. So how we can define that syntax? We can configure directly route. We can configure the route path. Route path is some path reference name, and we have an element, and this element can return. This element can return. So here you can put a div and your content. That's how we do. That means it's not necessary to bring a component. So you can directly render anything in this way. That means route can use markup directly from element. So it can render the markup directly. That's how we do that. But here also same JSX rules you have to follow. That means all should be in one container only. You have to keep everything in a single container, right? Now, another point is when you are configuring the routes. So this is route can use markup directly from element. Okay, that is the point. Another option is, so if user is not requesting any specific path, then you can define default path. You can define default content to render. That means when user is not requesting any specific path, then you can define default content to render. But the question is, how you know that he is not requesting anything? So for that, generally what we do is, in the route we define path as slash. In the route we define the path as slash. So element is nothing but here we define. That means here the content to render default. So default content to render, this I will give one, right? Default content to render, you have to write there. It can be a component or directly markup. That means you saw that actually when I opened this page, means when I opened this in the URL, I am not requesting, it was empty. That means a website cannot show any empty screen, right? It cannot show any empty screen. By default, it should start up with some screen. It cannot put an only navigation bar empty. By default, one category will come. That means you can see, suppose I said flipkart.com. When I open this Flipkart, it's not empty. By default, one category is coming. That means by default, something is coming. Sometimes it may be latest offers. Sometimes it may be what you visited previously, right? It cannot be empty screen. By default, one should come, right? That you have to design. How you configure that? Generally, how do we define that? You see here. So we are going here and we are defining the path. That means we are writing the route path. So what is the route path? You can see I am writing here. So route, okay. If route path I defined as route path is slash, then the element what to render. If route path is slash, then we will keep a main, and in this we will put a heading saying that home. So home, and here I will just put a paragraph. This is tutorial home. something like this. That means we are configuring that default. It will come default. I'm not requesting anything in the URL. If I request, I can request anything. See, I can request anything directly here, /CSS. It will get me CSS. We can query directly from URL. That is the advantage, na? Routing advantage is you can query anything directly from URL. That's what we discussed. That means it allows you to query any location directly from URL. Right? This you can do in general HTML also. Right? You know that hash locations will be there. That means if there is a page, it have intra-document links, you can directly navigate to any location with the hash reference. This is general available in HTML also, but here we are doing that in HTML we use hash location. Here we have to use route paths. We have to use route paths. Generally in HTML we use hash locations. That means, for example, suppose this is a page. Suppose this is a HTML page. And in HTML page, so you have a lot of information, suppose. That means let's copy some content here. Means like some paragraphs of information here. That is actually hash location. Oh, the hash location here we need. Yeah, I'm keeping here. So some paragraphs of information. I'm keeping here some paragraphs of information. Lot of paragraphs of information is here. And somewhere here we have a heading called HTML and it have an ID HTML. Somewhere else we have another heading CSS and ID is CSS. And usually when we run this page, so the page contains a lot of topics, how to reach to HTML or CSS. In the URL, you can just use hash CSS. It will take you to CSS. Right, in the URL, you can put HTML, it will take to HTML. This is a general thing already there in HTML. But we are not using these techniques anymore, right? So we are using routes. We are configuring the routes. So usually this is navigating to that particular path. You can request anything directly. I requested JS, then it will get me that JS. Get me that JS. So if I am not requesting anything, that means I will remove all and hit enter. Then it will get me directly home. That means if user is not requesting anything, by default we have to get home. So any other content. That is one concept how to define. Now another point, if user is requesting a path and it is not available in application, then you can render wildcard route. You can render wildcard route. We call wildcard route. Wildcard route is defined like this. So we have a route and here the path is asterisk is a wildcard. We can use a wildcard route. Asterisk is a wildcard. And asterisk is a wildcard element. Here it is nothing but content to render. If requested path is not found. Understood? If the requested path is not found, what content to render? We will decide that. Slash indicates what to render if user is not requesting anything. And if user is requesting anything, it will render. If user is requesting anything which is not there in the application, then what to do? It will keep empty. It should not be empty. That means now here you can see, suppose here you can see some here. I am requesting /CSS. It is working fine. I am requesting here. I am requesting here JavaScript. There is no JavaScript. It is JS. I am requesting JavaScript. It's empty. It cannot be empty. Right? You should tell something that there is no path by this name. Then generally what we do is in such situations, if user is requesting something, so HTML is coming, CSS, links okay. Because don't think that because routing concept is you are allowing the user to query from URL. That means it's not necessary that he will use only links to navigate. He can directly access anything from a website. He can directly access any resource from a website without the page. That is the reason I hope you know already. If anybody asks what is a website, 99% wrong answer is website is a collection of web pages. It is not 99, 100% wrong answer. You can have a website without web pages also. Website is not a collection of web pages. Website is a virtual directory. Website is a virtual directory with collection of resources. Without a web page, can we access resources of any website? Without a web page, can we access resources of any website? We can. We can access if we know the path. If we know the path. For example, see, in my computer, iNet MGR, IS, it is my local server, right? You can use any server. This is my local server. In my local server, what I am doing is, I have a website called shopping. Open, its physical path is this shopping. In this shopping path, there is a folder called public. Okay, in this public path, there is a folder called images. In this images, there is an Inox banner. So it is actually what type of file? So it is actually a PNG file. Inox banner PNG file is there. Now, in order to access this resource, I don't need a page of that website. What I can do is, you see, http://localhost, the website is shopping, in that /public, in that images /inox banner.png, it can directly access that resource. You can directly access the resource without a page. That means, for example, in a website, they have a PDF document. If you want to watch that PDF document, do you not need to go to their index page from their tutorials, from their PDF? No, directly you can access PDF if you know its path. If you don't know the path, then you search in search engines. Then search engine will directly take to that path. That is the reason when you click a link, direct PDF document opens. That means without visiting a website homepage or index page, you can access website resources. Without a web page, there can be website. But how users know which resource where present? That means how anybody knows my resources path and name? Then we need to provide a good interface for them. What is that interface? The interface is web page. And that is why web page is called as a, you know that web page is called as a hypertext document. That hypertext means hyper. Hyper means beyond. Hyper means beyond. Right? The word hyper means beyond. It's a general English term. Right? That means, what is a web page? It is a hypertext document. That means I opened Flipkart, a web page opened. Now, is this only the content it is having? Is this only the content it is having? No, there is a lot of things beyond it. This is web page. Hypertext document means what you are seeing is not just the content it is having. Beyond it, it have a lot of things. And when you click a link, why it is called hyperlink? Hyperlinks means there is some content beyond it. There is some content beyond it, and you are reaching to the content beyond it. That is the meaning of hypertext markup language, HTML. Many people will tell you angle brackets are called markup, square brackets are called markup something. No, that is general term, hypertext markup language. Hypertext means the text which contains information beyond what you see. Markup means a language used for presentation. Marking up is preparing presentation, right? So that is the point here. So we need to understand this concept, that you can request anything from URL, but if it is available, it will deliver. If it is not available, you have to tell something. Then how do we do that? We use by using wildcard. How do we write a wildcard route? See, I am defining here another option, route. And here, if route path is asterisk, then what we will do, element. So what is the element here? We will put a main. So in the main, I will put a code. In the code, I will put here as not found. And I will say page you requested, not found, like this. Page you requested, not found. This message I am giving. Right? Now, important is here, when user is requesting whatever is there, suppose he is requesting HTML, it will get that HTML. Some here he is requesting something like JavaScript, and there is no JavaScript. That means it renders that page you requested not found. How it suddenly came in red color? Because I am using Bootstrap. In Bootstrap, code element is used for errors. Code is an HTML element which is used for displaying code, error codes. Right? Code is an HTML semantic element. And Bootstrap can recognize it automatically and gives in a red color. Right? Usually we use these semantic elements for presenting suitable contents for situation. Right? So this is generally it is displaying because you requested something, it's not there. Right? So this is what you are requesting, it is displaying. You are accessing something. So suppose anything you accessed here, some footwear, it's not there. Page you requested is not found. Suppose I said JS, it is there coming. This is called wildcard route. Wildcard route means it defines the path to be, the content to be delivered. So when user requested some path and it is not available, right? How do we configure the default and how do we configure the wildcards, right? While configuring the path, these are very basic points here first. That means if whenever page opens, by default, it comes with one option. After that, it will accept the request from the client and it will render the contents. If manually user is requesting from the URL, it will deliver if it is available. If it is not available, then it will navigate to wildcard route. Now, very important is what he is requesting and what is not available. We can display detailed content. Later you will learn actually. As of now, I cannot use that directly here. Suppose see what you, so page you requested, which page you requested, that also we can show here. Actually, we use an expression. We have a location object. Location object is having href. Location is having href. So you see that location is not available. But actually there is a location href. But why it is not available? Because we cannot access directly browser location using virtual DOM. That is what I told you, that for that usually we need some hooks extra. we need to use some hooks. Actually, we need constant. So, or say we have variable. So some location is equal to, we have an option use location. Use location. We have to use this. Actually, use location is a member of React router. That means you have use location. You can use it. Now, actually, through location object, you can handle so many things. That means through location, you can get the details and display. But it's not available so by default. So you will see later. Why? Because how to handle the hooks in a component you will learn. Here it is saying that use location is not available. It is saying that it is used in the context of router. Context of router we will see. Because that is what I said. Why we need components if we can directly render some markup? Why we need components? Because these kind of interactions you cannot handle, because this is not a member of current element. It is present in a component. From there we have to access. So such dynamic things you can do later. This is dynamic na? So if you are doing some dynamic things that you can do later, we will see. Later we are going to understand the dynamic concepts and we will use those hooks in later stage. That means you can even tell what he is requesting and what is not found. That means detailedly we can say that this you are requesting and this is not there. You can request any of this, right? That is generally how we configure the basic route. Now this is a simple route technique. So without any components, we don't have any component. Everything we define just by using direct markup, right? This is complete example. Let me give you this example. This is Spark component.js. That is the Spark component.js. Let's copy this. Yeah, this is. That means how we can configure and define a simple route path. That is. Now, the same thing we can handle by using components. That means you can configure the same. That means here you can render content from any component instead of using direct markup. Instead of using direct markup, you can render content from any component. That means now what we can do here, we can design the same example with components. Just what we do is here, we will do some changes in this now. What I will do here is just go and here I'm creating a function and this is HTML. This is HTML function. What it returns, right? It returns what? That means it returns this content. Am I right? It returns this content. That means we will cut this and we will make it return this content. This is the content it returns. That is the content it returns. This is a function, a HTML component we have designed. It is in the same page. It is in the same file. You don't need any export or any option. Now, what should happen here? So here element is what? Element is HTML. That's what we have to do. That means it is not rendering the markup directly. It is bringing markup from a function. It is bringing from a function. So it is bringing from a component. The same I have to do with others. That means I have to create a function, CSS, and this CSS function will return and it will return the markup, this one. This is the CSS markup. That means we access that CSS here. That means CSS here. We can use a combination here. Now I say HTML will come, CSS will come, JavaScript will come. Means few are coming from components and few are coming from markup. Direct markup we can render or we can configure this, right? This is generally how we can manage. So let me give you this part of example also, same, right? This example is using the markup direct, as well as it is using the components, and we are rendering component. This component can come from a separate file. This component can come from a separate file. We can bring this component from a separate file and we can use it. That's already done in the previous example I showed you, right? We can bring the component from any another file and we can use here. For example, that already we done. Suppose in the link I am defining here, so a link, and here we are configuring link, and this link to, so link to some shopping, am I right? And I given here as shopping, link to shopping, and here we can configure a route, we can define a route, and this route is using the path is shopping, and element is nothing but it have to render a shopping component. It have to render a shopping component. Shopping component we have to import. We have to bring from another location and we have to import. That means we need to configure that from another location, and shopping will get that component and deliver here. We can access and we can display, right? Anything you can access from any location and display, right? This is basically how we can configure the route. Now, when you are configuring the routes, you can see, now if I ask like, what is this routes? Routes is nothing but it is a collection of routes, and actually the shopping, the HTML, the CSS, they are presented under this horizontal line. They are presented under this horizontal line. Under the horizontal line, you written routes, right? Above the horizontal line, you written links. That means this is your navigation. So that means you see this is your navigation, and actually this is your outlet. That is the outlet. That is the navigation area, and this is the outlet area. That means routes are not only defining the route table, routes are also defining an outlet. They are defining an outlet. If these routes are present in a separate file, then you can bring them and use them here by using outlet. You can do that by using outlet. So by using outlet, you can bring it. For example, suppose here, see, here I will not use this browser router anymore, right? I'm not using this browser router. So what we will do is, let's go and add a new component. And this component is tutorial routes, okay? Tutorial related routes are here, okay? Tutorial routes.js, and we will create a function here. So export default function, what is it? Tutorial routes, what it should return. So it should return div, so class name container fluid, and here I have to import the browser router. Is there, right? Yeah, so I have to import the browser router from React router DOM, okay? And I need to import one more, what is it? routes, and another one is route. We are configuring it. Now what we are doing here is we are configuring. Let's go here, remove this part. That means let's write here. I'll write directly browser router. Okay. In this browser router, I will go and remove this routes area. Understood? We will remove that routes part completely. Okay. Routes are removed. And these routes are kept here. Those routes are configured here. Configured here. All the routes are defined in this location. All the routes are configured here. That means browser route is having routes. All the routes are defined here. Now what about the links? Links are present here. Am I right? Now what we will do is, I'm not using a browser router here. I'm just using a navigation. I'm just using a navigation. You can see here. Now you can see in this path reference, you will have a problem with the router context. Router context, that means here also we are using a browser router. In the browser router, I am defining like this, right? That means I am configuring the browser router. All these options are defined. That means we have all those options configured. Now where to put the result? Under the horizontal line, we have to bring those routes. We have to bring those routes. Those routes are present in which location? We have to import it. Those are present in which location? We have to import. We have to import that. Import means what? Actually, see, currently this is not working. You observe here, I click on HTML, CSS, the path is coming fine. Path is coming fine. Where is result? Result is decided by outlet. Na? Previously, we designed that outlet in routes. But now the outlet is designed separate. It will not directly work. We need to create a multi-level hierarchy. I will show you that. Actually, this must be rendered here. That means what we will do is, in the tutorial, this is all the routes configured in a Spark component. So all this is defined. Now under this, actually we have to use an outlet. We have to use an outlet. We have to use outlet. This outlet we have to get from our route. Outlet we need to define. But still this outlet is defined. That means this indicates where the result should come. This indicates where the result should come. But you see the outlet is not displayed. Why? Because that must be a child path of this. Whatever you are rendering as outlet, that must be a member of the child path. That means it must be a member of this route. That's a very lengthy hierarchy actually. That means what we have to do here, we are configuring the route. All these routes need to be accessed under one route. Understood? All these routes must be accessed under one route. That route will be used as outlet. Understood? That means directly these individual routes cannot be accessed as outlet. Outlet should contain only one route. Understood? These all must be the child routes inside it. These all routes must be child routes inside it. That means we have to access all these child routes and display them in a page as an outlet by configuring all of them under one route. Outlet cannot access all individual routes. Outlet can access all the routes together. That means all these routes, whatever written you hear, all these routes must be actually a member of a route. Understood? They must be a member of route. They must be a member of route. And what should be this route path? This route path should be actually slash. Its route path should be slash. On slash, what it have to do? Now it have to use an element. That element you have to configure. Under that, all this will be treated as outlet. This will be treated as outlet. This is again a separate lengthy hierarchy. That means first you have to create separate browser routes. You have to create separate navigation. You have to bring these routes and display in this as outlet. So this requires a combination of parent and child hierarchy. That we will see next session. Tomorrow we will see that as a separate example. So how to configure child routes, how to configure route parameters, and how to use route hooks. These are important. That we will see tomorrow. First you have to try this, right? Then we can go into second level. Second level is nested routes, child routes, how to define them. Okay, right. Tomorrow we'll see.